Welcome to the second of two Inside Government programs for the spring 2018 semester here at CU Community College. It's a show that is broadcast on Spectrum, Verizon, FiOS, the Auburn Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, as well as WIN 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. The OWASCO watershed is about 208 square miles and is the responsibility for making sure there is compliance with the rules and regulations of that area. In the past has fallen to the city of Auburn and the town of OWASCO. With limited resources, they have had mixed results. Recently, the responsibility for watershed inspection was transferred to the OWASCO Lake Watershed Management Council. That is different than the OWASCO Watershed Lake Association. We'll talk about that in a moment. But joining us today to explain the new role for the council and its work are OWASCO Town Supervisor Ed Wagner, who was recently re-elected as its chair of the council, and County Planning Director Steve Lynch. Welcome both of you back here to the studio to talk about all of this. So for those who have not been paying attention to and I just did a quick search last night, it's been about 10 stories in the last 3 months about this, so if you haven't paid attention, it wasn't that you weren't looking. So what is the OWASCO Lake Management Council, Watershed Management Council?
The Management Council is made up of members and directors. The founding original members were the City of Auburn, Town of OWASCO, and Cayuga County. Since the original membership, we expanded and we brought on the Town of Niles as director, Fleming, Scipio, and Locke. And
so how many, are they all elected officials?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Except you have a new member for the city, and we'll get to that. That's a non-elected official.
Well, that's not part of the Management Council. It's part of the inspection program. Okay. Which the City of Auburn does have representation, but they only have one vote on the Management Council. And
you were just elected, re-elected as chair. Who are the other officers?
Aileen McNabb-Coleman is the vice chair, and then Debbie McCormick is the secretary, and Joan Jane from Niles is the treasurer. And
why just those townships in the city versus all the other townships in Cayuga County?
Well, we're looking at, there's a potential maybe 21 towns and villages in the watershed. And so we've reached out and tried to solicit as much membership as we possibly can. We're looking and actively pursuing more members to join this organization.
And is this staffed solely by county staff?
We provide staff.
Okay.
Eileen O'Connor, who is the Director of Environmental Health for the county, does a lot of the work for the organization. But with this transition, we'll be bringing in employed people that'll be employed by the Management Council.
So explain what the transition is.
So when the Watershed Inspection Program, which is the responsibility of the City of Auburn and the Town of OWASCO, and they're allowed to designate an individual or other people to do that work, when the Management Council was created, the intention was that was created with the intention to run the Watershed Inspection Program.
So how old is the council?
2010.
Okay, so less than a decade old.
Yes.
Okay.
At the time it was created, it didn't really have its, administratively and functionally, it wasn't ready. It was only 3 members, OWASCO, Auburn, and the county. It hadn't expanded to the towns yet. It didn't really have the organizational capacity to do it. So the Cayuga County Water and Soil and Water Conservation District stepped up to the plate and said, we've got administrative staff in place. We can bring them under our roof.
So rather than the town of OWASCO, which you are the supervisor of in the city of Auburn, operating this program, you farmed it out to the Soil and Water Conservation.
That's correct. We supplied the revenue for the program to operate. They supplied the administrative support.
And when you say you supplied the revenue, where'd that revenue come from?
The water users in both Auburn and OWASCO are purveyors of water. So there's like presently when we first started, there was like 40 cents a quarter charge per individual home. And so, which they were paying no more than $1.60 a year. Since 7 years ago, we've increased that revenue to $1 a home for a quarter. So each home who gets water from either Auburn or OWASCO, they're paying $4 a year for watershed inspection.
And so that money was being paid to Cuyahoga County Soil and Water Conservation till when?
It still is.
Okay.
We're in a transition phase right now. We had some meetings about that just earlier this week. At some point, there's a 4-party contract right now between Town of OWASCO, Cuyahoga County, City of Auburn, and the Soil and Water Conservation District. And we'll change that to a 4-party contract that includes the Watershed Council.
So why make the change?
Well, first of all, that was the intent from the beginning.
When you say the intent from the beginning, so going back to 2010, was that the intent of the leadership of the Town of OWASCO, the City of Auburn, and the county?
Correct. They went and visited other municipalities that have a similar setup. I believe it was over in Cuyahoga Lake in Canandaigua. And they visited, I think it was, who was the chair at the time? Tortorisi was the chair. They went over there with John Klink, who was the supervisor in OWASCO at the time, went over and they started the program. And so the intent was for the Management Council, which is an intermunicipal entity that lives, breathes, and knows their own community. So they thought that having that input from those leaders overseeing the operation of the inspectors would be a good idea.
So as you shift, and when will the shift be complete?
We're anticipating within the next 6 months.
Okay, so when this shift occurs, what will be the new structure or new operational plan?
Probably in the beginning right now, we are looking to expand the program itself by hiring more inspectors.
So how many inspectors does Soil and Water have now?
Currently, up until recently, until January 1st, we had 2 inspectors. We had a specialist and an inspector. So we're, our specialist is Drew Snell, who is continuing on. Tim Snyder, our watershed inspector, is staying on with the Soil and Water Conservation District in the same role.
So will not trans?
He will not transfer over. So we'll be looking to advertise for new positions.
So when you say staying in the old position, will he still be doing the same work for Soil and Water?
From what I believe, we had written the inspection program had written grants under the Soil and Water Conservation District's management, and so Tim Snyder is going to stay on to oversee those grants that were written under the administrative part.
Okay, I'm a little confused. Was it just, okay, you know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, so Tim Snyder is becoming an employee directly of the Soil and Water Conservation District to implement a lot of the work that they're being engaged in with grants that they wrote while they were watershed inspection program employees.
But he will not be doing watershed inspection.
No, he will not.
It sounded like you were, okay, that's what I was trying to get in a little
He'll be
confused.
implementing the same programs that he was doing before as far as prevention.
So this was the responsibility, and still is the responsibility, of the City of Auburn and OWASCO. You still have, do you have veto authority over a plan?
Yes, in a way they do, because the Watershed Inspection Committee is a standing committee of the corporation, the 501c3 OWASCO Watershed Management Council, and its members are the Town of OWASCO, the City of Auburn, and Cuyahoga County. So now there's 2 members from the City of Auburn as of today on that.
Seth Denton has just been appointed.
Yeah, we changed the bylaws today.
But he's not a voting member?
He's a voting member of that committee.
Okay.
He's just not a member of the board of directors.
Okay.
And that committee has, by the bylaws, has control over the watershed inspection program.
And why make that, why doesn't OWASCO get 2?
Well, the theory behind it was that they supply more drinking water than we do. We're supplying just under $20,000, and they're supplying about $125,000 to the program annually. And
before we go any further, what is the difference between the OWASCO Lake Watershed Management Council and the OWASCO Watershed Lake Association? They'll be on next month.
I'll start.
So the Management Council is an intergovernmental organization focused on management of the watershed. The OWASCO Watershed Lake Association, or AWLA, is a lake association. It's a private entity with private individuals. They primarily
does not have any regulatory authority.
Right.
Okay.
They can lobby We cannot.
And they do.
Yep, and we cannot.
Okay. So let's talk about piecemeal of some of the work that you're undertaking. So one of the big ones is looking at the 1984 rules, which is some 34 years ago. Why are you doing that review? Other than it was 34 years ago.
With the problems that the lake is facing now, it really is a chance
Blue
to look
algae,
at
development, all those
That's correct.
associated issues. Okay.
So it really is time to take a look at every single help that you can give to the lake. And one of those things is updating the watershed rules and regulations to see how we can strengthen them and strengthen, not with a hammer, not to be over-regulatory in the watershed, but to be able to strengthen the opportunity to do what's right out in the watershed.
Where are you in the process of reviewing those regs?
We've been through, we have a steering committee, which is made up of probably a mix of lake, shore, and association owners, municipal staff, municipal elected officials, and farmers.
Okay.
Basically.
So how big a group?
I think there's 9 people
On the steering committee?
on the steering
And they've
committee.
had 2 public meetings, if I read that correctly?
We've had public meetings,
Okay.
and we've had stakeholder meetings, but we've had a lot of working sessions. So we have a steering committee that's engaged. What we have been doing is having a series of extended staff meetings. It depends on what we're working on. If we're
So
just
county
working,
planning, health department, Kathleen Cuddy.
correct.
Yes.
Okay.
County planning, health department, soil and water conservation district, the DEC, Cornell Cooperative Extension, the City of Auburn, planning staff, et cetera. So depending on what we're working on, if we're working on agricultural issues, we bring in all of both sides. We bring in the farm communities, we bring in the lakeshore advocates, et cetera, and we try to work through the issues.
And I think I read somewhere where your plan is to release the full plan versus piecemeal.
That's correct. And not even the full plan written as a regulatory document, the full plan more as a easy to read
These are the bullet
narrative
point. Okay.
document. Here are the concepts and here's what we're going to change.
So what's your timeline? Where are you in the process? Where do you hope to finish by?
We had hoped to have that out to the steering committee by the end of April. It's a challenge to put a document together like that to really...
How large is the document now? I know I can press and get a PDF, but I did not choose to online. So how large is the current rules? And
Oh, well, the current rules and regulations for the lake are
4 pages?
5 pages long.
Okay.
3 pages are definitions.
I just didn't hit the
So
document.
they're very short. Skinny Atlas watershed rules and regulations are probably 25, 28 pages.
So do you see a process where you're going to get into more detail similar to what Skinny Atlas is doing?
Yeah, in some instances we will. There's some similarities in the watersheds and there's some differences.
So once you release this document, what is the next step from there? Do the city and the county have to, the city and the town of OWASCO have to sign off on them first?
We have to approve it, and then from there it goes on to the state, and then from the state it will disseminate to all of the different agencies that will review it and give feedback. And we're doing all this work in hopes that it will get approved, but there's a chance that it may not get approved.
So that's been the major hang-up, and I think we've talked about this when you've been on in the past, is that while it's nice that you all do all this work and it's important, it really is up to the state of New York to give their imprimatur to what you finally do in the end. Am I correct on that?
Yes, and what we try to do, we have met with the commissioner of Ag and Markets, brought him in.
Richard Ball was here in November.
Yeah, and he came in and spoke to our committee, and we spoke, and he gave us some tips, and he offered his services of his personnel to help us along the way.
And are they involved in this?
Yes. Yep.
So one of the things he did say was he didn't think elected officials should be in the process.
Yeah.
So as an elected official, what did you think of that?
If you read the newspaper, I had a rebuttal.
I did, but I thought I would ask you here.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm just one spoke in the wheel that needs to contribute to this, and so it needs to be a team approach. It needs to be done collaboratively among all facets: the agricultural community, the farming community, the home builders, the highway superintendents, health department. Everybody needs to be involved. Everybody needs to have input. And we think we're doing a good job doing that.
I did have one question on that meeting. Why was the citizen escorted out of the meeting?
I wasn't part of that, so I really don't.
Do either of you know why they were asked not to be?
I don't.
Okay. There's some things in the news today. Before we get into your Bloom conference, and I want to talk about that as well. The city and the town of OWASCO, I believe it's the town of OWASCO, have been asked to participate in this EPA study. Am I correct on that?
Not the town of OWASCO.
Oh, just the city of Auburn.
Just the city of Auburn.
Any idea of what they're trying to find out? Is this just a global look at algae blooms? Or are neither of you involved in this?
I'm not really sure about this.
I just read the article this morning.
Okay, so the other story is the use of ultrasonic buoys. So this is the one that intrigues me. To deal with algal blooms, this looks like something the city's looking at. Is this something that you as a council have even raised a spinnaker on?
Well, there was a presentation on it today, right out of the Netherlands.
Okay. Were either of you at that?
Both of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about it. What's the idea?
Harmful algal, without getting into a lot of detail, the algae themselves rise up and down in the water column. They rise up by filling up their bodies with gas in order to get to the sunlight, and that's when they photosynthesize, and that keeps them alive. This concept is to take ultrasound, create a barrier that they won't go above, they can't get to the light, they die.
Like a dog fence?
Yeah,
Okay.
essentially.
Good idea, bad idea from what you saw?
My question when I saw it was, besides the details of cost and practicality and so on.
I think it was $1.2 million was the price tag.
This is to do a section, a comprehensive section at the top of the lake. My
For
thought
those who
was
don't, top, bottom, top would be
North end of the
OWASCO,
lake.
north end of the lake.
Yeah.
Okay, just so we're aware.
Around the intakes of both OWASCO and Auburn's water treatment plant.
Okay.
My question was, is this really just addressing the outcome, or do we, are we just, is it a Band-Aid approach, or is it really fixing the fundamental problem of sediment and nutrients getting into the lake, creating algae, and so on? However, it could be a very good component of a broad strategy that addresses some of the
But you're not
algae.
at that stage yet to have that discussion.
Well,
No.
probably not, but it's worth
Well, I'll
exploring.
ask you as somebody who has a budget has to put together. I'm assuming if they want to put it by your intake valve, you're going to have some say in it. What do you think of the idea?
I'm not sold on the idea. To cover the northern end of the lake, to cover the area where the drinking intake is, it's going to take about 30 buoys. And to have 30 buoys out there in a recreational lake where people boat and recreate.
So navigational hazards is a word here?
Yeah, it's definitely a worry. And it's solar panels. Each one's probably 8 foot by 8 foot. And it would.
So these are not like water buoys, which are these straight
these are
off
huge,
2 foot
huge float.
tall.
They're like swim rafts with solar panels on them, with depth finders and electronic equipment that goes sonar that goes down below the surface.
Okay. So we had originally planned to have you both on a couple of weeks ago, but then this conference came up, of Algae Bloom Conference, which, did you both attend?
Yep.
Yes,
And this was held at SU, at SUNY for ESF. They still get the degree, it's just cheaper. So you went there, what was discussed?
Everything associated from.
Did either of you present or speak?
No.
We got the ability to ask questions,
Okay.
but we weren't a presenter.
So what was the goal of the conference?
Education and what the experts who were on the panel, what their to hear what we had to say, and then to give us some recommendations in the end on what could be some possible strategies.
So what you heard, what aren't we doing? What they made recommendations that a community should be doing, what are we not doing? Whether it's right or wrong, what do they suggest?
From my perspective, is more money needs to be put into helping agricultural from nutrients not getting off their farm, whether it's from putting on more lagoons, whether it's helping with fixing situations with drain tiles coming off and having nutrients in there, preventing. We need to prevent nutrients getting into the lake.
So who pays for that?
As of right now, it's the state has been funding many of this.
But to do, I'm assuming what the conference would like to be done would cost multiples of the millions of dollars already spent. Am I correct on that?
There wasn't a laundry list or a menu of options that here are the things that should be done. One of the conclusions that researchers from University of North Carolina to Penn State to University of Massachusetts, et cetera, were all there, all dealing with HABs, harmful algal blooms, over a long period of time, decades of research, and they all agreed and they said it's complicated. And when they say it's complicated, it means we don't really know exactly what triggers this. But what they all agreed on, that's something that adds to it that needs to be controlled, is the amount of sediments and nutrients that get into a lake, because the algae cannot exist without sediments and nutrients.
So, reversing engines a little bit here, could some of that be addressed in the revisions to the 1984 rules and regulations?
They could. It's complicated. There was a professor, a doctor from the University of North Carolina, who said that you should have buffers along all of your major waterways in order to catch the water. That's easy to say. It's very, very difficult to implement. Not every field that's going next to a stream is going downhill towards that stream, for example. Mm-hmm. So you might not need a buffer there. So how do you write rules and regulations that cover many, many different kinds of situations?
Did you hear some things that were said that you said, hey, we are ahead of the curve on this, that we're doing this already?
Yes.
I would say we're ahead of the curve as far as data collection, research into what's happening on the land. And I think that's going to really position OWASCO Lake probably better than almost any other body of water across the state to really be a pilot for implementing whatever the factors are that come out. There was a lot of talk about best management practices, agriculture, environmental management, the capacity of soil and water conservation districts to put these things in play on the ground. Those are all very valid and very helpful, but we also need to keep the nutrients out in other ways. And it's not just agriculture. It's the way we manage our roads. It's the way we manage our septic systems and our houses.
We have a lot more houses in the watershed than we ever have before. One of the things that your group is working on is this 9 elements planning process. Okay, first of all, what is it? And I'm not going to ask you for the scientific name or the symbol for all the 9 elements, but what is the 9 elements process?
The 9 elements plan is a research and modeling effort to really identify where and how the nutrients and sediments and the pollutants are actually getting into the lake, and then identify mitigation strategies that'll keep them from getting in the lake.
Where are you on that process?
Sure. It's been a long process. There's been some delays, but we're actually still on schedule. The process right now, we've got approved quality assurance plans for all of the data collection. There's winter data collection going on right now. Today, as a matter of fact, they were out taking samples for winter samples. That'll continue through the spring and summer. The modeling, which is being done by Cornell University PhD students, the model for the lake, the computer model for the lake, has been approved. So we're going to go through all of that data research collection, calibrate the model, and then in the fall we'll start a public participation process.
And is this the, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, so we're hoping to be completed by July of next, our grant ends August of 2019.
And is this the same plan that City Councilor Terry Cuddy's been talking about, or is that a different?
It's a different plan.
Different plan, okay. So your hope is to be finished with this. Does this mean that it will change the quality, if adopted, it will change the quality of water?
If it's adopted, it'll act as a blueprint for strategic actions that'll help reduce pollution in the lake. And a 9 elements plan is specifically meant for non-point sources, which means it's not coming out of a pipe from a factory. It's coming out of many distributed locations throughout the watershed.
Along water, roads,
right,
bridges.
Where the TMDL that Councilor Cuddy talks about is really focused on
total management load, sorry, okay.
Managing a load that's coming from a single source that there's regulatory control over, and we can say, according to this, you have to reduce by this much.
Okay. A couple of other things have been in the news recently. I just want to get real quick on this. OWASCO Lake, or the the area was awarded some regional economic development funds in December, and I know there's been, am I correct on that, first of all?
Yeah, for conservation work.
So what's being funded? Is it all conservation work? Is it being done by the county, or is it done by private individuals?
It's being done by organizations outside of the county, outside of government. So you have the Nature Conservancy,
okay,
and you have the Finger Lakes Land Trust. Both got grants within the watershed to purchase lands and to conserve lands.
So the county wasn't part of these grants?
We weren't part of the plans, but we are helping to advise them. They're developing their own GIS model or graphic information model to decide where the best properties are, and we've already done a lot of that base work, so we're helping them coordinate.
So is it for research on properties?
No, the idea is to research what are the most productive properties to get a hold of and transfer into conservation easements.
And how much money are we talking about?
1.2 million.
I think the Nature Conservancy got over $1 million.
Okay, because I know last month I think there was a news story. There were some questions about
right,
where the money was going, who's it going to, and what.
They don't have particular. They didn't put in an application with this property and this property and this property.
The your office, though, in the county has been involved in some discussions, at least among department heads, about a possible incinerator in Seneca County. First of all, we touched on it really quickly with the city manager a few minutes ago. What's being proposed in Seneca County?
At the Seneca Army Depot, that many thousand acre former Army Depot in Seneca County, which is right on the lake, they're proposing a waste incinerator where they'll be trucking in, and by rail and by truck, waste from various areas all over, I would imagine upstate New York.
So trash.
Trash.
Okay.
Yep.
So
and burning it.
And so county department heads, it sounds like, if I read the story correctly, are against this.
Well, we were asked by the legislature to review it and to give a recommendation on whether the county has any stand to oppose it, and we said we should oppose it.
So where is that project right now?
I believe they were originally trying to get approval through the town of Romulus for a special use permit, and the town was not forthcoming with that.
So they've
gone around. They're going end around. They're going to the state to try to get a state permit.
So your department has looked at what this impact would be on Cuyahoga County. What's your feeling? What would the impact be?
First of all, bringing in even more trash to this region, which is takes more trash than any other part of the state from the rest of the state, which is just not good business. Also, the amount of traffic on the roads from the amount of trucks. I think it was 238 trucks a day. Not all of them will go through Cuyahoga County, but some certainly will. And then the burning of the waste produces, stuff that's going to come out of the smokestack. And while there's a lot of regulatory mechanisms to take care of that, how do you know that something's not really blowing over your vineyards and your croplands?
So this goes to a bigger issue, and I just real quickly got about less than a minute and a half. 81 is still floating out there, literally. It might be floating if they don't deal with it soon. It's being looked at again by the governor and reviewing it in conjunction with what they're proposing in Seneca County. Do you have concerns about where the 81 project stands right now?
We are trying to, right now we're hoping to get some kind of combination of a community grid or tunnel, open cut, or go back to the viaduct. My concern is if they just go to community grid, was going to increase trash traffic.
And that is what Mayor Walsh is.
He's in favor of just community grid. So to me, for the surrounding towns, it's not a good idea.
And are you concerned that this discussion has been reopened by the governor?
Absolutely. I'm encouraged by it, and I'm hoping that.
So you're happy the governor reopened it?
Absolutely, because I think before it was leading toward the grid only, and now there's some light that we might be able to get either at least a tunnel with a community grid, so that both sides are happy.
Light in a tunnel. I got it.
Yeah.
It took a second. Okay. So we want to thank Town Supervisor Ed Wagner, who is the chair of the OWASCO Lake Watershed Management Council, as well as Steve Lynch, the county's planning director, for joining us to talk a little bit about the OWASCO Lake Watershed. It does not flow, gentlemen. I got to tell you that. OWASCO Lake Watershed Management Council, and we hope you'll come back and give us periodic updates, especially as you get through the benchmarks of your plan revision, as well as the 9 element plan. Next Tuesday, we'll be back with the new chairman of the Cuyahoga County Legislature, Pat Mahunick, who will be joining us to give us a county update, as well as to talk about his State of the County speech, which is next Thursday, and this is all before we go on spring break here at the college. Before we go, though, we would like to let you know that you can send us your ideas for questions or future guests to be on the front page. You can do so at emailing us at cozguytho@aol.com, or Inside Government, or Beyond the Front Page, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, 13021. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cuyahoga Community College. I want to thank you for watching. We hope you have a good night and have a great tomorrow. And they'll tell us when we're out. You're still on.